everyone. This is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation and the Sheridan Report. Make sure you go online, check both of those organizations out. You can find the Sheridan Report at Sheridan Report on Twitter, and you can find the Retired Boxers Foundation on Facebook. I am your co-host for the Inside Boxing Weekly show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm always well when I get to talk to you two about boxing, so let's do it.
All right, and of course, out of the mountains of West Virginia, this is the only day where he has internet service, so that's why it's the only time he's on. John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here, Mike. Actually, doing my split. I'm coming to you from the great state of New Jersey tonight, so we're in smaller mountains here tonight.
Great New Jersey. I've never heard that used in the same sentence before, John.
Great state of New Jersey, under snowfall tonight.
All right, so we got some awesome fights to talk about last night. Of course, a scintillating heavyweight matchup, Jeremiah. Luis Ortiz with a 10 or 12-round unanimous decision over Christian Hammer. Is Ortiz getting old, or is just Ortiz maybe never was that good to begin with?
I don't know. I can tell you that it was a fight of the year candidate. I mean, that's a given. I mean, I think it's a shoo-in right now, just, from what we've had so far. I do think it is a bit of, I do think Ortiz is aged, but then again, I think he's been aged for years now.
Yeah.
I also think that Christian Hammer he's not special in the way he looks, but he is a game guy. He knows how to survive. I think when you look at Ortiz, and I was looking at some of the Facebook groups, and Ortiz has been getting a lot of stick for his performance, and I had a guy saying that there was a lot of kill shot opportunities. I actually think Hammer I think he's just durable and crafty, and sometimes those guys are hard to get out of there. I mean, you look at his fights against Vince Povetkin, he goes the distance. I mean, he went 8 rounds with Fury. This is a guy who knows his way around the ring, and he lollygags, and he looks like he should be able to, somebody you could beat on. But again, he is crafty. But I do think it is a bit of Ortiz getting old too. And I actually think after this performance, guys are more likely to fight him. I'm not saying he was, real big and avoided beforehand. I just think that, his style, him being a crafty southpaw, having good power, I think people were more, there was just risk and not enough reward for that fight. But I think after this, I think guys are going to be more willing to fight him. But it's kind of hard to say. It's like, where exactly does he fit into the mix anyways? With all the Alphabet Soup organizational nonsense, we know that, Dominic Brazil or Dillian White is probably going to get Deontay Wilder. Anthony Joshua is just kind of doing his own thing. I know Kubrat Pulev is also, I think, a mandatory for some stupid Alphabet Trinket organization. So it's just hard to figure out where he fits in. Again, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Povetkin at this point. I mean, we're talking about two guys who are past their best, but if Povetkin gets Usyk, then again, I don't know. It's kind of hard to see exactly where he fits in.
Yeah, John, and I don't know what to say, but this fight put me to sleep at about the 5th round, so I can only talk about the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, I agree, you Mike and Jeremiah, about the fight itself. Hammer is, he was just kind of in there to survive. We see a decent amount of guys like that. I mean, you watch the fight, and if you're really being honest about their performance, they're not in there with any strategy to win the fight. They're not fighting to win. But Ortiz's performance certainly wasn't anything special. He's had a couple of fights in recent years where he's looked more like that. My criticism in this one was he really didn't look particularly anxious to press for the KO.
I think where he fits in, I think it's almost been underrated. And he might have hurt himself a hair for that, even if he's looking more vulnerable, but just for building up fan excitement, and especially if they want to go pay-per-view. With all these separations in the promotions, I think it's actually being underrated. That to me, I could see a very likely scenario where, PBC maybe in the fall puts Ortiz in with Wilder again and just tries to get fan buzz going since they had such a good first fight. And maybe that actually could do surprisingly well. And I could see Hearn doing the same thing with Joshua, with Usyk in the fall. And I don't know where that leaves Fury on ESPN Plus with who his potential opponents are. I don't think it leaves him anywhere. I think that's a potential disaster because I really can see that possible scenario. There's some risk for Wilder if he fights Ortiz again, and there's some risk for Joshua fighting Usyk because, these guys that they'd be fighting can't fight. But if they're going to want to make some money in the meantime above what they've been making, there's going to have to be at least a little bit of risk there for the fans. But one thing I didn't like about fights like Ortiz, Hammer last night, and there's such separation now. You're talking about all three promotions, so to speak. You got DAZN, you got ESPN and Top Rank now, and you got PBC with Fox and Showtime. Is just putting fights out there that aren't competitive, thinking they're going to showcase guys. We keep getting that time after time, night after night, and to me, the ratings are just dropping, and early reports on last night's ratings are not good. And that's going to happen in all the promotions, and they're going to have to stop it, I think.
Yeah. Jeremiah, I still think the problem is the heavyweights suck. I haven't seen a good heavyweight fight between two high-quality heavyweights since Lennox Lewis fought Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, you even look at Ortiz, and, he's a skilled guy, but he's also, you look at these guys, and they're already blowing a little bit in the second round. Yeah. To me, it's a far cry from what even an out-of-shape Riddick Bowe, who could, toss 800-plus punches, at 240-plus. I don't know. I don't really find many of these guys particularly impressive. Maybe if Luis Ortiz fought in an older era and he was forced to, boil down to, 220-something, then, we might have something there. The guy does have skill. Guys like Fury do have some skill, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm not that impressed with the era, but they've done a decent job in recent years of pairing some of these heavyweights and getting quality fights, like Dillian White and Chisora, and some fights like that, Parker and White. They're doing a decent job of making the most out of these guys' ability. It's just, you really got to pair the guys at the top so we can have some clarity there. And with Fury going to ESPN and Wilder with Showtime and, Joshua doing his own thing, I don't know. I don't know how this all plays out. But I think I speak as a fan that we just want to see the best fight the best. And I didn't want to touch on John's he was talking about the numbers in terms of viewership. And I don't know if he saw last week's number, but I think the main event did something like 366,000 views. Did you catch that, John?
Yeah, I saw, early reports on last night that were real low, like in the 250,000 range on Showtime. And, DAZN doesn't even report their numbers. Their subscribership's very low. The viewing numbers got to be absolutely minuscule. The ESPN numbers have been low lately. And, I see a disturbing trend. I think a lot of people want to stick their head in the sand. I think the heavyweights myself are getting better. I think, there's a chance by the time the dust settles, it could be approaching a 1990s type era thing. But like Jeremiah said, we're not getting class.
Yeah, I think Lennox Lewis and Vander Holyfield. No, there's nobody here to sell Lennox Lewis or a Vander Holyfield or anywhere near that. We don't even have a Ray Mercer.
We have guys better than Ray Mercer, and it's gonna. I think that Joshua Wilder.
Oh Jesus!
Fury would outbox Ray Mercer.
Lennox Lewis couldn't, but
Ray Mercer had a good chin, and And, but he would plod forward. You saw him in the Jesse Ferguson fight. I mean, the guy lost to Jesse Ferguson,
I'm pretty sure, wasn't that the fixed fight?
He had a lot of, that's what he was trying to fix.
He also beat Tommy Morrison,
out of there.
who would beat the shit out of Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, Tommy Morrison, I wouldn't go that far to say that too quickly. Tommy Morrison got knocked out by Michael Bent in the first round. So, I mean,
he also beat George Foreman.
It's not a certainty, but I think that this era could approach the 90s type era before it's said and done. But like Jeremiah said, you got to get. I mean, you were starting to get some clarity at the top when you had Wilder fight Fury, but it ended in a draw. Then the rematch falls apart, and now you have three guys that are at the top that I think are separate from everybody else. With Usyk being the wild card to see if he can make a move to enter that. For me, I'm going to have to see him against one of those three guys before I, and I don't think he has to beat him, but just to see if he's competitive with them and he can hang. It's possible he could. It's possible he may not. But I'd like to, these would all be interesting things, but whether they're going to happen or not. I mean, I will say I don't like Wilder in Brazil. I don't like at this stage, Wilder fighting a guy that got knocked out by Joshua, in recent years, and Joshua just dominated him. I don't think that does anything for the guys at the top. And, I think we've got to get away from things like that. I think Joshua Miller is a little more interesting. But, we're going to have to get some of the top guys fighting each other again.
Jeremiah, could this approach the 90s?
Well, no. I mean, I think you and I agree on this. I don't see it. I mean, I do think that, it has potential to be okay. I mean,
it could
there
be
are a lot of
entertaining,
Olympian.
maybe.
Well, I'm still waiting. My question mark isn't so much about. I mean, I'm not that impressed with Fury or even Joshua or Wilder that much. But my thing is, I want to see how Joshua progresses and see how some of these guys coming up through the ranks progress. I mean, there are a number of interesting heavyweight prospects that are rising. We've talked about some of them in the past. I am interested to see how some of it plays out, because I do think this will be we'll with a large influx of Eastern Europeans in recent years. I want to see how they shape the heavyweight division. Obviously, we've had some of that for years with both Klitschko's and Povetkin and Ibragimov and some of these other fellas. I want to see what these new guys have to offer to the table. Whether they can take it as well as dish it. I'm interested in that. I do think there are some things on the horizon that I will be paying attention to. I'm not convinced that this is going to be, a rock solid era. I don't know, man. It's just with the way things are. It's hard to tell what exactly is going to happen. It's hard to look into some, crystal ball and say, hey, well, we're going to get a trilogy here, or we're going to have good fights there. It's just, there's just so much politics anymore that I don't know. But I'm not that impressed with these guys. But again, I don't know. There are some interesting things on the future, but yeah.
Yeah, and my problem with it is this. People think that Fury and Wilder was a good fight, and there was, 160 punches landed?
I think it was a dramatic fight, though, and there was a lot of good moments in it, and there was a lot of drama. I mean, it was a good fight, but the rematch is not happening, and that kind of stuff's a problem, like Jeremiah said.
I don't think it's a problem, because the problem is that we don't get Fury fighting Joshua after it.
Well, either any of those three. As we said, and I don't disagree with that. I just think with the drama that happened, it flipped where it would be better to have the Fury Wilder too. But combinations of Fury, Wilder, and Joshua fighting would be good. And even if they had some multiple fights, it would be good. And like you said, Usyk can get in there, and then you've got prospects coming up like Hrgovic and Ajagba, and some of these guys are looking good. I mean. Joyce looked limited in the last outing by Stavern, but he'll be in some action fights, and so will Konatsky, and Miller's going to be in some, and I think there's some stuff could be shaping up good, but if the guys don't fight each other, it's going to be a big problem. But the good thing about heavyweight compared to these lower weight classes is now that we've got way too many weight classes, these guys are always jumping weight classes, and with all these belts, at least at heavyweight, there's no other weight class to jump to, and that, believe it or not, does help to lead sometimes to better top 10 matchups than these lighter classes because there's nowhere to go. But the problem you got now is this promotional division is looking worse than ever, really, and that is a big potential stumbling block.
All right. Also last night in the main event, Arizlande Lara fights to a draw with Carlos Castano, whatever the hell his name is. But did you think
Brian Castadio? He's forgotten already.
I don't care. I mean, I was asleep because of the heavyweights. Did you think the decision was fair, John?
I thought a draw was fair. I had a lot of rounds in this one that could have gone either way, so I kind of was dropping my scorecard along the way. But my feeling at the end was that Lara had done enough, but I don't have a problem with the draw here. Castano had some good moments, and Lara had some good moments. I don't think Lara's maybe slipped as much as I thought some people were saying based on the fight. They talk about his movement, but a lot of his movement, the way he did it, I didn't think was all that effective. In other words, he wasn't a guy that circled the ring. He would just back off out of range to, the other guy's punching range, and it kind of led to boring fights. He's not doing that as much more, but I don't know if that's all age. He was blocking a lot of Castano's shots. I think that was part of the way he was looking at it. I mean, I didn't think a lot of Castano's work was that effective. Though he can fight. I mean, I agree the guy can fight. I mean, he's a legitimate world class, contender, top 10 level contender guy. But he definitely won some rounds. But in the end, I thought the draw was fair, not a robbery or anything like that. Probably appropriate. But if you made me pick a winner out of the two, I would have picked Lara.
All right, Jeremiah, what was your take on the fight?
Yeah, I'm with John. I mean, I think if you take a winner, it's Lara. Looking at all the forums and whatnot after the fight, it seems as if Lara, by a pretty clear majority, was favored by most people. But, as John said as well, a draw is not a robbery. I mean, it was a close fight. I actually think they were both doing a damn good job of being defensive. Castano, I actually thought was pretty sharp in that he was pretty aggressive, but he was also able to block a lot of Lara's work. And so I didn't see a lot of clean shots that were being landed from either side. But for me, it felt like Lara it was kind of like you actually saw the Cuban School of Boxing with Ortiz and Lara, where they fill a lot of the airtime with jabs. And a lot of the jabs are just kind of range finders. They're pity pats. They're just trying to see where you're at. But he was filling the downtime with him, and I thought, you look at the punch stat numbers, and Lara and Castano were neck and neck there, so there wasn't a whole lot to differentiate the work rate. Obviously, Castano was throwing, many more power punches, but I was entertained by it, and I think John's right. I mean, Lara is still a top-notch fighter, a world-class guy. But kind of a hard luck guy, too, if you think about it. I mean, he very well could be undefeated at this point. I mean, a lot of people saw him beat Canelo Alvarez. Well, heard he deserved to lose, I think. It was a close fight. But, we're talking about a guy who really hasn't lost. In fact, he's kind of like a Joel Casamayor type, to be honest with you. He's shown that he has a chin. He's got some heart. He does have a little fire in his belly. And, I've come to respect him more because of it. But I also like Castano, too. I mean, he's never really fought anybody of that caliber. But I like his work. I mean, I think his inside game is sharp. For a guy who's as good at moving around and engaging distance as Lara is, Castano did a pretty damn good job, again, for an inexperienced fighter. He was pretty wild with some of those hooks sometimes and just seemed to let his hands go just for the sake of doing so. But whenever he got in close and he was throwing body shots, I was impressed. I mean, his left hook to the body it's quick, it's sharp, it's technical. He's got quick hands. I liked what I saw from both of these guys, and I've liked Lara for years now, and I wouldn't mind seeing him, do it again. I don't know where else they would go from here, but I think that Castaño's got a pretty bright future at 154, and they were talking about how he defeated Errol Spence Jr. in the amateurs and Sergey Deverenchenko. I mean, you can see that the kid's good. I mean, he's got good feet. He's sprightly. I like what I see from both these guys. And I wouldn't complain if they did a rematch.
All right. So would we say in the rematch that Castaño would maybe fare better just because of the age thing, John? And the fact that he's got a higher ceiling to improve?
I don't know. The thing that troubled me a little bit with Castaño last night, and I agree with Jeremiah about his skill level and his abilities, and he's definitely a tough fight for anyone. But the thing that surprised me last night in a negative way about him being the younger guy, and I think I saw Jeremiah made a comment on social media, and I saw some of the other writers, and I saw it the same way. It was around, I think, maybe the 6th round. Castaño had picked up the pace some, and it looked like, you were thinking he was the younger guy and he was waiting and he was going to go the second half of the fight that way, and he didn't. I saw a guy that was taking 2 minutes of the round off a lot of times and then just trying to flurry in the last, 15 seconds of the round to steal the round. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to try to win the round, but I thought this is the younger guy who was supposed to be picking up the pace in the second half of the fight, wearing Lara down, the older guy, going to the body, putting a lot of pressure on, high work rate, working, and he wasn't doing that. And that's something that concerned me for the future, because he couldn't do it against an older guy like Lara, who's 35, who's very good, but he's not a war of attrition guy or anything either, and he couldn't pick it up against a guy like that. That could prove trouble against some other people like that. I think Jarrett Hurd would run over the guy, it's not that Castaño's not good, but I mean it's just Jarrett Hurd is that good, and that's something that in the future, like if there was a rematch, I need to see improvement from Castaño there, and if he doesn't improve that, you might end up with the same type of a fight.
All right, let's go ahead and look at the fights coming up next weekend, which will be Friday, March the 8th in London on ESPN+. Anthony Yarde on the undercard. Of course, he never fights anybody, but he'll get a title shot soon, I'm sure. The main fight here, I think, is Daniel Dubois, who's one of those heavyweights that hopefully could turn this into the 90s against Razvan Castaño. I think this is a good test for Dubois. Castaño is not a walkover. He's a guy that usually lasts rounds. John, what's your take on this matchup?
Basically, I kind of agree with you there, Mike. Dubois is interesting because, as we're talking now, there are, at the top you have some, I think, good heavyweights, and then you've got this crop of young guys that shows a lot of potential, and Dubois is one of those guys. A very young guy for a heavyweight, too. And, Castaño's been in with some people. He went the distance with Parker. So, you can learn a little bit there. Ortiz blew him out, but, hey, Ortiz is a top guy. So you might, Dubois is a huge favorite, but, you might learn a little bit out of it about Dubois. And these young prospects are interesting. There's a few of them that are showing enough that if they all continue to ascend, there's going to be some good fights on the very near horizon. So Dubois is definitely in that mix. So he's got to keep pace with the other guys, so to speak. And we'll see how he does. If he could get Castaño out of there, of course, that would be a bigger statement.
All right, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I think you guys summed it up pretty well. I mean, Castaño, he's been around a little while. He's fought some solid competition, and he has showed that, sometimes he can give some guys some rounds. So I don't think it's a bad step up at this point. I mean, but, Castaño he's definitely a lesser version than a guy like Christian Hammer, in my opinion, where he can take a guy some rounds, but I just don't think he has. I think, like John said, there are a lot of guys at heavyweight who they're not there to win. And Kajanu reminds me of one of those guys as well. I don't think he's as crafty as a guy like Hammer. He might have his amateur experience, but he just doesn't seem like he's in there to win it quite like some other guys. But it's a good, like you said, Mike, it's a good step at this stage. But when you're at this stage in your career and you're building your brand and, you're 9-0 with 8 knockouts, you got to go out there and get another knockout, because when you're fighting these guys who have been around, you're being graded on the past performances. So if it took Joseph Parker, all damn fight to win a points verdict, go out there and knock him out. Go make a statement. Get him out there as quickly as possible. I mean, I think the heavyweight division presents that better than any other division. I think there are a lot of guys who are just a bit tubby, not really there to win, more of a sparring partner mentality. And I think it serves, these things up on a silver platter for young, in-shape heavyweights who have skill. So I just want to see Dubois get a knockout.
All right, next up, we got the Zone, March the 9th, Saturday. Dimitri Bivol against Joe Smith. This is the fight I like, Jeremiah, because chances are somebody's getting knocked out. What kind of a shot do you give Joe Smith in this one?
Well, I mean, since he could punch, I think, you got to give him some sort of a shot. But I'm kind of disappointed in this, in the sense that I don't think Joe Smith Jr.'s managers are really managing his career well.
No.
When it was initially said that he was fighting Artur Beterbiev, I thought that was a significantly more interesting fight, just because Beterbiev is not as quick with his feet. To me, he looks more vulnerable. I haven't seen Bivol. I've seen Bivol eat some clean shots, but he's pretty defensively good. And I haven't seen him rocked. He's tight. Of course, that's been part of the criticism levied at him, is that he almost seems too defensively responsible at times, and he doesn't seem like he wants to go out there and get it. But it's not a bad fight. I mean, Smith Jr. is serviceable. He does have a real big punch. I mean, maybe he hits the hardest in the light heavyweight division. But Smith I think he's just a little too raw. He lacks the nuance that Bivol has. And I think Bivol is probably going to decision here. I think Smith is tough enough to go the distance. And I just think stylistically it meshes better than the Beterbiev fight would have went. So I think it meshes well with Bivol. I think he has a guy in front of him who's going to come at him, who's going to let him box a bit, show his sharpness, and he's going to land power shots. And I think he's going to get a decision win here. But I think it would have been much better if Joe Smith Jr. had fought Beterbiev. I don't think they're doing a good job of managing Joe Smith Jr.'s career.
Yeah, and John, as Jeremiah said, he's made for him. He's made to Bivol look good. But the one thing that I do like about the matchup either way is at some point Joe Smith's going to hit him, and we can see if Bivol can take a punch.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting fight. I mean, I'm all with Jeremiah. I've scratched my head at the Joe Smith management ever since his huge KO over Hopkins. You think that maybe the guy had a good backstory, tremendous power. He can even hit harder with the left hook than people give him credit for. I mean, he's got the huge right hand, but his left hook's good too. And, for a puncher who comes forward, his defense actually isn't horrendous, and he's got a decent jab. But, put him in Barrera, which was kind of a, you're taking on a tough challenge, but Barrera at the top of the division at the time, or you're nearing the top, and he got his jaw broken in that fight and was able to go the distance. But, we're wondering if that was maybe the best fight. It's nice to see people taking on challenges, but you're wondering if that was the best fight. You assume his management's looking at something. So I think HBO must have given him a bunch of money. And then I did actually run this by, Keith Idek, who gets a lot of good information, writes for Boxing Scene and The Record in New Jersey. And, Joe Smith's from New York. And he did say that it was his belief that Joe Smith was just getting a ton of money, so to speak, relatively speaking, for his value for this fight with Bivol. So that's why they were taking it, which would make sense because he's only had like one fight against a no-hoper since the Barrera fight, and now he's going in with Bivol. And like Jeremiah said, Beterbiev had shown vulnerability to getting dropped. He got dropped by Johnson, and he got dropped by that guy Page earlier in his career. So, that would match up good with Smith there, at least for a shot. And I see the odds have been creeping up against Smith in this fight. One of the Jersey sites has got all the fights now, and of course it's legal in Jersey, so that's interesting to me. 888 Sport discovered that this weekend, and I see the odds creeping up against Joe Smith, and that's where people actually have to put their money on it, and of course they can legally. So, not looking that good for him. I'm not sure. Again, except for the money, I'm not sure why he took this. I had read that he and his father had started a business as well, and I'm just looking at the circumstantial evidence and saying there's nothing wrong with looking at your life after boxing. That's a good thing. Maybe they're literally looking at getting some money for the business. This would be a lot of money to, fund the business. But Joe Smith hits hard enough. He's always got a puncher's chance. But I don't know. I think he might have trouble going the distance with Bivol in this one because he's going to be pressing Bivol, unlike guys like Pascal and Chilemba. And Bivol does have some power, which we haven't seen in the last two fights, but I know it's there. And, Joe Smith's going to have to land something. That's a shot here. And I think Joe Smith is a good fighter. He's legit top 10. I like his abilities, but, taking the Barrera fight, taking this one, I just think these are tough assignments with his limited amateur background, and maybe another direction would have been better.
All right. Also Saturday night on Fox, we have got Sean Porter and Ugas. But also before that, we've got one of the heavyweights, John, you were speaking about earlier. Efe Ajagba will take on Amir Mansour. And this is interesting to me because I think this is the first time Ajagba's fought somebody that will actually go in the ring not scared to death of him.
Yeah, this is the first time he's going to be fighting a guy that really is going to throw something back. I like the opponent at this stage, except for the fact what worries me. I had second thoughts, though, after I saw this fight sign when I got to think about it for a couple of weeks. And other promotions have done this, too. And it seemed like this is something years back, frankly, they wouldn't do. They knew even then in prior eras that was a bit too risky. These are TV fights. You're putting a 45-year-old, 46-year-old guy in as kind of just an opponent, who's likely to get knocked out. That's dangerous for something bad happening. It's not that it's good at any time, but, we're not talking about some off-TV fight somewhere with some guy that's just still playing out the string. Ajagba's a high-profile prospect, and Mansour's obviously a tough guy and brings surprising power for his age and stamina, but just being in with Ajagba on national TV is probably not a good idea, a guy of that age. And, you saw Jeff Horn fought Mundine recently in Australia. These should not be, that was a high-profile Australia fight.
Yeah, but that fight, yourself, John, there's a shitload of money to be made when you put that fight. I can understand that. I don't understand this. And Ajagba has fought nobody. I mean, Ajagba's last fight, I know the guy he fought, Santino Turnbow. I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but all I can tell you is this. He's in his mid-30s, and his last athletic experience was playing arena football at linebacker for me. So I don't think that he belonged in the ring with Ajagba. And also, on top of that, Turnbow, that was the first fight he ever fought at heavyweight because he was a cruiserweight every other fight he fought until that one. And that was his last fight. And you also had the guy, wasn't he the guy that the dude was supposed to fight and he bailed while walking to the ring or some crap?
Yeah, Harper. Although that guy, he had given Ariola a tough fight, actually. But
yeah, but I mean, overall, when you look at the guys he's fought, they're not putting him in to test him right now. They're just kind of hanging out. And Mansour's 46 years old. And if this was a younger Mansour, it would be a bad idea to put Ajagba in there. But this is no longer 2013 or 14, so I think you're going to.
Well, I like getting guys moved quicker. I don't think we need all these no-hoper fights. So I like the concept of actually having them step up already. But it's having 45, 46-year-old guys, as an opponent in a national TV fight. That you've seen stuff like this on other cards. I'm not. It's all promotions, and it used to be they'd stay a bit away from it. I don't think it's something a trend we want to be getting. We want to be starting where that's acceptable. Something bad's going to happen sooner or later, and it's going to be, really put boxing in a bad light. You could probably go through the division, try to think of a. All right, well, he just fought recently, but this might be an example like. Maybe if a Jogba was fighting you put him in with Travis Kaufman or somebody like that. But and I'm not saying Mansour beat Kaufman, but I'm just saying with a guy of Mansour's age, I just think there's you're taking a risk of something bad happening, and you can't really expect Mansour to go toe to toe with a Jogba or try to or do what it would even take to win, except for throwing a few bombs.
The scary thing, John,
round.
is this. We both have seen Mansour fight, and he's going to try to stand there and go toe-to-toe with him.
I think he will for a little bit in the first, but I don't think he'll do it for long. I think that even as tough as Mansour's been, he's not going to want to stand in there and take shots from a Jogba.
Let's hope he doesn't.
I don't think he will. I think he will throw a couple bombs in the first minute and a half of the first round, and that might be about it. But yeah, that's where there's a possible problem there, because I'm anxious to see a Jogba step up because I like him the best out of all the prospects. But Mansour, again, he's been a tough guy, but he just went out against Hrgovic. Maybe if that hadn't happened at this age, I still wouldn't like it, but maybe it could be more justified. But especially coming off of that, it's probably not a good idea.
I think it would be much more justified if he wasn't coming off of that, because that's the fight that makes me think this is a bad idea. Jeremiah, what's your take on a Jogba in this fight?
I say let it be a bad idea. Let something bad happen. Listen, I don't want Mansour to get hurt or anything, but it's sometimes, again, I get cynical. I'm like, well, maybe people are going to wake up to some of this stuff and demand that we get better fights. But I actually don't think that it's that bad of a fight at this point. I mean, Mansour, he's still serviceable. I know he's old. But you look at, like you were talking about, the guy's competition.
Oh, I
right?
know. That's why I find it interesting. That's about it.
Yeah, well, I think at this point, I don't think it's a bad step up. I mean, Mansour is over the hill. He's been over the hill for years. But he is a southpaw. He does have a good punch. He does have some craft. He is a guy who can survive a little bit, So I don't think it's that bad at this stage. I don't think we're going to get some, of course, you'd like to be hopeful there. I don't think we're going to have some, big knockout where Mansour is permanently damaged. But, just stylistically, again, at this stage, I don't think it's a bad fight. I mean, it is one of those things, like John said, I don't want to see a bunch of no-hopers on the guy's record. And Mansour, again, he's a southpaw. He's got some craft. He can punch a little bit. He's a wily veteran. And unfortunately, he's been reduced to this sort of thing now because, it's time to get a potential title shot has been passed. There was some hope there, a few years back, but now, he's confined to fighting prospects. I mean, he fought Sergey Kuzmin not long ago, Hrgovic, like you guys talked about, and now this one. So I think, unfortunately, this is just how the guy's going to have to make his living. And I just want to see how, the kid steps up and performs his duty. I mean, if he goes out there and gets a nice knockout, and there's no permanent damage, I think that bodes well for him. But we just got, again, like all these things, we just got to wait and see how it plays out.
All right, main event, Sean Porter against Ugas. Ugas has solid wins over Ray Robinson, Jamal James. Did lose to Amir Iman and Emmanuel Robles. That was like 4 or 5 years ago. Jeremiah, I know at one point you liked Ugas. How much of a shot do you give him against Porter?
I think he's got a shot. I mean, of course, the thing holding back the big shot is his lack of power. I mean, if you can't punch, it's unlikely. Even if you can punch, Sean Porter is going to be a tough night out for you. And I'm more interested to see, what sort of style Ugas takes. I don't know if he's he's going to box a bit more, or if he's going to come forward. Porter's going to be the boxer. I do like that about Porter, and I do like that about Ugas. Is they've got some versatility in their style. Ugas has improved, since his early losses. He's a technical fighter. He's got a good jab. His hand speed's pretty good. He's just well-rounded. To me, he's not. He doesn't look like a world beater, so therefore I'm favoring Sean Porter. But I do think stylistically it's interesting there because Sean Porter is not a tall guy, and Porter sometimes, to his credit, he's got that versatility and he can box or he can fight a bit, But sometimes, if he chooses to box, he gets outboxed. He suffered some of the issues there, and he might suffer some of the same fate against Ugas, but. I think if Porter goes out there and he gets aggressive and is shorter, he fights Ugas. I think his shorter arms will probably dictate. I think that will help him, obtain a victory here. But I think it's an interesting styles matchup. I don't think Porter's going to have too much to be afraid of because of Ugas's. Again, he doesn't have one punch power. He doesn't hit I don't think he hits as hard as Keith Thurman or a number of the other guys that Porter has sparred or fought. So I think there's going to be some good close-in mix-up here, but I think Porter's going to take a decision. But it's an interesting fight. I like it.
All right. John?
Yeah, I agree a lot with Jeremiah on this one. I think this is a good fight. It's on regular Fox, one of the better competitive fights that PBC is putting out there on regular Fox, and regular Fox has got far more exposure than anything anybody else is broadcasting on. So I think there's an importance for boxing just in that sense, even though it's Porter and Ugas. It is a good competitive matchup. I think what's kind of interesting with the styles thing is Porter was a decorated amateur. Matter of fact, he even got a win over Usyk in the amateurs, and he had fought as a 165-pound middleweight in the amateurs, and he's been a welterweight in his pro career. But what I'm getting to, in his last fight against Danny Garcia, he pulled out the boxing Sean Porter, and we hadn't been seeing that. We've been seeing the crude, mauling, wild Sean Porter, and the boxing Sean Porter was kind of shockingly effective. You would thought he'd been beyond that, and you weren't going to see that. And he proved he could still do it because Danny Garcia's got skill, and I'm wondering if that's something now that we're going to keep seeing from him. And I'm kind of interested about that Saturday night because Ugas can box, and he's developed more where he can fight as a puncher a little more than he did earlier in his career. But like Jeremiah said, he's not a big puncher. He's got some knockouts, but he's definitely not a big puncher. And Porter's not a huge puncher either. So I think this one's going the distance, and I think Porter. I think he probably will continue to mix in some of that boxing that he did against Garcia, and that and his old style combined probably be enough to get a decision. But I think it'll be interesting if he can't box at all and he's just mauling and wrestling with Ugas. I don't know. Ugas has got enough skill and versatility that actually maybe if it turns into an ugly fight, maybe it gets tight and tough to score. But I think Porter will probably be able to mix it up enough the way he fought Garcia and his pressuring style that he'll be able to do enough to get a decision. But it's definitely one of the more quality competitive matchups we're getting on TV lately, and it's on regular Fox. So hopefully I think for boxing's sake, it'll be a good, solid, competitive fight. But I do like Porter in the fight.
All right. Next up, we're going to talk a little Usyk. We talked about him a little earlier, Alexander Usyk. It was rumored he was going to fight Povetkin, but now Povetkin is tending to not want to fight Usyk from everything I've read today, and would fight Michael Hunter on the undercard of Usyk against Carlos Takam. What's your take on Carlos Takam against possibly Usyk? Do you think this is the way they're going to go, John?
I had been, and I tweeted this months ago, I'd been predicting the Usyk Povetkin before they were even talking about it because it makes some sense, and they both have co-promotional deals with Hearn now. I was disappointed and semi-shocked about the news that you talked about, Mike, which I did hear also, that Usyk Takam, I mean, that's a time waster to me. I mean, that's just I don't think Usyk was going to have any real problem with Povetkin, but at least Povetkin's a legit top 10 guy, so, hey, the guy's a legit top 10 guy, so you can't say it's absolutely meaningless. Establish Usyk firmly as a top 10 heavy. The calm, it just doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't, to me, mean anything. I don't think Usyk has any problems with him whatsoever. So that's a time waster. Povetkin and Michael Hunter might be actually kind of an interesting fight.
I think it will, too.
Yeah, that might be actually kind of an interesting fight.
I think Michael Hunter might beat his ass now at this late stage in his career.
I think at this stage Hunter would have a shot. And I think Povetkin, I mean, obviously, with that fight falling apart, I think we have some evidence of that already. I think, I don't know if Povetkin, how committed he'd be to beating Usyk at this stage, but like you're saying, Mike, Michael Hunter will see an opportunity, but Povetkin probably would view that more as a fight he can win, and might be for fan entertainment wise, that might be a better fight, but for significance of the division wise, for Usyk making this heavyweight move, the Povetkin thing would have been much better. I don't like the calm thing at all, but Povetkin and Hunter is somewhat of an interesting fight.
Yeah, but if you look at it like Evander Holyfield's first fight at heavyweight was an old, washed-up James Quick Tillis. So when you compare it to that, Carlos Takam's not that bad of an opponent, is he, Jeremiah?
No, it's not that bad. I mean, yeah, when you look at the history of some of these guys moving up, I mean, a lot of them have done worse than Carlos Takam. I mean, Carlos Takam was, he was beating Chisora, who
got hit in the back of the
pretty
head.
well. And, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, like John said, it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna tell us that much about Usyk. I mean, I think he outboxes him clearly. But again, you look at some of these other guys who moved up, and a lot of them have taken on worse opponents than Takam. So I'm not going to sweat it too much. I mean, Usyk does seem like one of the few modern fighters who's actually driven for greatness. So I'm not going to give him too hard of a time for this. I mean, the guy has been traveling, right? He's been beating people in their backyard. He just got done with the tournament. I mean, this is a guy, I think, who's already proven that, he wants the best of the best guys out there. So, a guy like Takam, again, I'm not going to give him too hard of a time there. But I'm with you guys. I mean, I think Povetkin Hunter would be interesting. Hunter actually fought Usyk pretty well, and Hunter's turned out to be a pretty good fighter. I mean, he doesn't get much play in the forums or, on social media, but he's a pretty good fighter. I mean, and people often forget or just don't bring up that he had a rock-solid amateur background, too. I mean, he was in the Olympics. So it's not, it's a decent fight. I mean, I again, as I was saying with Ortiz, I'd rather see Ortiz fight Povetkin. I think that would be, just with where they are at their stage in their careers, I think would be a good fight, and that way they don't
Jeremiah, it's going to be two guys that are about to get their AARP cards staring at each other.
Well, okay, right, but that's exactly why you make the fight.
I don't want to watch two heavyweights stare at each other. I watched that last night.
You got to watch two older guys fight each other sometimes.
Yeah, because they can't get out of the way. Maybe it ends up being a better fight.
Right. Well, sometimes the work rate's not there.
Yeah, but I mean, Povetkin's not as boring as a lot of these other guys. But I just think, these guys are about evenly matched at this stage. But Hunter's good. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing this fight at all. I mean, Hunter Povetkin and Usyk Takam, I don't mind it. It's not too bad. Again, it's one of those things like Povetkin is just he's kind of in limbo right now. It seems like a lot of these heavyweights are just kind of waiting around, hoping to get their shot at Joshua, hoping to get their shot at Wilder. Guys like Ortiz, guys. And Dillian White, right? I heard that the WBC was going to what was it? I think Brazil has been the quote unquote mandatory for a little while now, and I heard Dillian White was actually going to sue the WBC if they don't make him the mandatory, if he doesn't get his fight. And I actually can see his complaint there. I mean, White is obviously more proven than Brazil is. And I think maybe you force his hand there. But again, it's a lot of heavyweights just kind of waiting around to get their shot. I mean, what's Pulev doing? Pulev's probably going to get a crack at one of these guys in the near future. A lot of these guys, like John said, they've got co-promotional deals with Hearn. So it's just interesting to see how they'll be paired. And again, you get Hunter Povetkin and Usyk Takama. I'm not, I don't think that's a bad card.
I don't think it is either for the heavyweights. I'll probably still sleep through most of it. Anybody else got any boxing news or anything they want to talk about?
The only thing I'd add is I'll do my periodic sounding the alarm. I don't know what the Zone's plan is going to be, but it looks like PBC and Top Rank are, and the promoters that have kind of also done work with those organizations, that they're kind of admitting that their formula is just going to be trying to showcase guys and then go pay-per-view. In other words, and when I say showcase, I don't mean that those are going to be good fights. They're going to be fights of their guys against guys that don't have any hope.
Yeah, well, they're hoping they think their guy's going to knock them out in a round or two and create a buzz.
Exactly. And right. And I do not – I mean, that's been a bad formula for boxing in, more recent 10, 15 years. And, I just don't want to see boxing going back to that. Like we talked about, I mean, a Spence and Garcia, I don't like having to pay for it, but that's what just in simple terms, like that's a real fight though. And maybe it doesn't go that long or something, but these are real fighters. You can tolerate it a little more, but all these like showcase fights for some pay-per-view down the road that we don't even know what it's going to be or if it's going to be that good. It's not. I don't like the formula. I don't think it's a good formula for boxing, and I'm concerned. I don't see any of the promotions saying, our formula is going to be, we're going to provide good competitive matchups and build the fan base, build the buzz that way, with matchups where either guy has a reasonable chance of winning. And I don't think that the other formula works. I just think that declines boxing's popularity over the long haul. So that concerns me. And DAZN, I don't think their financial model would work without, a dramatic influx of advertisements or having to otherwise go pay-per-view themselves. So, even though they're not doing it with Canelo Jacobs, it would seem inevitable. And most of their fights are not competitive that they've been showing. So there's something that they're up to, so to speak, down the road. And I don't like the looks of it.
All right, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I want to add on to that a little bit because, we've been talking about, I mean, hell, we talk about this stuff until we're blue in the face. But John's talking about the lack of competitive fights, and I know we both agree with him. Well, and we're talking about the piss-poor numbers that some of these shows are doing. I noticed I thought it was pretty interesting on Saturday that I seem to be one of the very few guys watching the Lara Castaño fight. And I noticed that there was a lot of boxing fans who were tuned into UFC that night. In fact, it seems like most of anybody who's watching fights that night were actually tuned into the UFC card. And it's like John said, say what you will of the company and how the fighters don't get paid as much. Again, it's because this is more of a free market system in boxing. But, of course, we lack a lot in other places because of it. And I just noticed that, I mean, Buddy Gibbs, he was watching UFC. I mean, these guys were tuning in because the matches were competitive. And, and because they were competitive, dramatic things were happening. I mean, again, I refreshed my Facebook page. People are like, oh, wow, what a knockout. Oh, well, what a submission hole or what are this? In boxing at its best, I think provides more entertainment than UFC does. But overall, you're going to get more entertainment when you're pairing guys that are close in skill, right? I mean, and when you encourage them, there's the thing about boxing economics that people don't seem to realize too is we can encourage these guys to go out and get the knockouts if we had a governing body. You give them pass out awards or bonuses for knockout of the night or whatever. In the UFC, you get that stuff. They will give you extra income for going out there and making a show of things. And I thought it was telling just how many people who I didn't even know watched UFC were making it clear that they were watching the card. So that was just one interesting aspect. The one thing I want to talk about, I mentioned the WBC and White. Well, I think Aragon Garcia is probably going to write a lengthy article soon on something that just popped up on Boxing Scene today, and that's the WBC. Okay, now I know a lot of us are going to be surprised by this, but Suleiman is going to promote Canelo Alvarez to something called the franchise champion of their
no, it's just like where it's going.
I mean, it's shocking. I mean, I know, and it sucks, man. It really sucks for me because I don't think Canelo Alvarez is that bad of a dude. I don't think he's all that disrespectful. I think he carries himself fine, but these are the sort of things. It takes me back to Oscar De La Hoya and how I had a hard time rooting for him just because it felt like the political machinery was behind
him.
And this is the sad thing. I mean, we talked about this on one of the daily shows. It feels like Daniel Jacobs and whoever fights Alvarez in the future, they're already down on the scorecards. I mean, there's just so much investment in him right now. And the WBC, I hate Suleiman, man. I've heard good things about him and how he does stuff for fighters and yada, 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 and a lot of this crap is in Southern California, whatever. I honestly don't care. When you have a guy who is heading one of the major organizations in boxing, and he's making it so obvious that he just acted like a jaded girlfriend when Alvarez gave up the WBC title, and now he's going out of his way to make things up to him. It's like he's whining and dining him. He's given now there's a Mayan belt. Remember, I talked about that on the Daily Show.
Yeah.
So now there's a Mayan belt, WBC Mayan belt that's going to be in the Jacobs fight. I mean, just the term Mayan is already denoting that it has some, sort of Mexican connotation, right? So no surprise there. And now he's a franchise champion. And the justification for this was, I mean, all they had on Boxing Scene was, I think, about a sentence or two where he's like, Alvarez has crossed borders and made a huge difference in the sport. The dude, oh my God, man, Suleiman is just, he's such a little bitch for Canelo, and it's just aggravating, man. This is why, again, we need a governing body. You shouldn't have this blatant obvious when it comes to these sort of things. I mean, they've got to be, you'd want these guys to be impartial and separated from them and let things be done on their merit, but no, it's like, no, we're going to promote Alvarez. We're going to give him a bigger title before, arguably the toughest fight of his career. You don't know. Daniel Jacobs is more in his prime than Golovkin was, and Jacobs is a damn skilled fighter. Again, we don't know, but it's concerning for me to see this open bias.
Yeah. So what are we
going
to do?
No surprise there, right?
Should we just do a UFC show, John? I don't even know what a franchise.
The alphabets are.
I don't even know what a franchise champion is, and the bad thing is, if you read the article, you still won't know what it is.
No,
you're right. You don't even know. They don't even define it, right? They don't even make it clear what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
they just make up a
I mean, what is he?
To be fair,
I was going to say, what is he?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Good.
No, I was just going to say, what is he promoting him as some sort of ambassador for the organization? What is it? I don't know.
I don't know. But my whole problem with Canelo has always been this. I think he's a good fighter. I don't think he's an all-time great, but I think he's a damn good fighter. But as you said, I cheer for him to lose because of everything around him. I mean, it's hard not to cheer against a guy that has every advantage known to man. And it's not his fault. And no, I don't think he should say, hey, I don't want this advantage, because you'd be stupid to do that. But I just think that this is the problem with boxing. I mean, from multiple champions, multiple divisions, silver belts, gold belts, bronze belts, bomb squad, all this stupid shit. I mean, I got to listen to Clarissa Shields talk about how she could knock out a 125-pound MMA fighter when she weighs 160. I got to listen to Deontay Wilder wants to end somebody's life. We got to watch Canelo somehow get a draw by a judge against Floyd Mayweather. I mean, we got to hear about how Mayweather and Pacquiao may fight again. This shit is all stupid. I don't want to see any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm to the point where I will pay the money to watch Garcia and Spence. I don't know if I will Canelo and Jacobs, just because the fact that I don't think that this is a fair fight going in, John. And I know you're a Canelo fan, but even as a Canelo fan, you got to realize all the money behind him, it makes it really hard for it to be a fair fight.
No, I mean, I think it might be a fair fight, but the WBC stuff's troubling, and DAZN has this financial, investment in Canelo, and I think it's bullcrap that that money's not all guaranteed. So, but that is then the point is, does Canelo have to keep winning, and then ultimately, if he has to keep winning, who's he going to be fighting? I mean, Jacobs is certainly a real opponent. We know that. And if he fights Golovkin again, we know Golovkin's a real opponent, but that's almost on Canelo's willing to take these guys on, but maybe a few years down the road he won't want to. If he wants to try to finish out that contract. So,
yeah, but then you get this problem. This is the problem that comes after that. A couple years from now, or a few fights from now, if they've got a way out if he loses, hell, you might see him lose a decision that he really should have won just so to get out of the damn contract.
Yeah, that's the problem with these contracts because, you saw Eleider Alvarez had a big one with Top Rank, and then he lost to Kovalev, and the contract literally disappeared. In other words, it wasn't guaranteed. They're saying that's the same case with Fury. So, right, it does present some possible problems down the road. So these deals are not good. I think Jeremiah made a real good point. I see the same thing he did about the UFC. I mean, I've always, watched both, and I felt the same. I've been feeling the same vibes that he was feeling, and I can't blame a lot of fans. Where it really starts to come to play is when you got a boxing card the same night as a UFC card. If the UFC's got their prelims and all the fights are close to even money, and then you're watching a no-hoper fight in boxing.
Yeah,
and then
everything's
you're
a plus
saying to yourself,
1,400 in boxing.
Right, everything. I'm sitting there watching the plus 1,400, and I'm saying to myself, I'm the idiot. The idiot.
And it's like every boxing match that's on is the Arizona Cardinals against the New England Patriots.
Right. That's where boxing's at right now. And the UFC's not doing that with their cards. And, I saw the UFC prelims got about 1 million on Saturday night. Even the MMA ratings are not massive, but boxing was catching ground up again. They were starting to gain back on them. It seemed like about a year or two ago, and now I see the gap opening back up. And that's for the reasons that we're talking about.
Well, now boxing ratings resemble the MLS soccer league now.
Right. They were always good to beat stuff like that, and that's why they were getting back on TV, but now they're dropping back to those kind of levels. And if they do that for too long, then I think what the networks look at is cost per viewer. Why they got back on there is compared to even NFL, believe it or not, the cost per viewer wasn't bad. But, if the ratings go down low enough, then the cost per viewer is going to get too high, and then you're going to get fights getting back to ESPN Friday night fight caliber level, or it's not going to be on at all. And
well, you know what? The fights we're
good.
getting right now are Friday night fight caliber for the most part.
Right. I agree. I think that's the problem. That's the problem is it was supposed to be something more, and especially you look at Top Rank's future. Top Rank's, it's not picking on them, it's just a fact. Top Rank's future schedule coming up from here on out is just absolutely abominable. I mean, if you look at what they've got slated starting next month, going the rest of the way, it's just Friday night fights level, basically.
Yeah, so basically
names.
This is all Friday night fights level, and then the 3 separate entities will try to put up one big-time fight, maybe 2, but just 1 for sure, and then they're going to give us the rest shit to try to set up the next big fight they have 6 months later. And
that's the problem.
Yeah, and to me, Canelo and Jacobs is not that exciting to me. Spence and Garcia is, but Canelo Jacobs I could live with. I would rather see Canelo Triple G3, and I don't think we're ever going to see that. And if we do, it's going to be a year or two from now, and, Triple G will come out in a walker. So, what the hell?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the little dirty secret about Canelo Jacobs, even though it's a good fight, is that, if you watch boxing long enough, and this was before some of the more recent declines started, that would have been a regular HBO fight. And that's the thing. Now, the zone's saying, well, that's what we're doing. Yeah, they're doing it this time, but I don't foresee that continuing in this climate. If they continue it, I think they might have something, but they can't with those.
The only way it can continue is if the zone gets out of boxing.
And that's what they want to do down the road. I'm sure that's their formula, but they're not saying that right now. But I think I think I've even learned some additionally reading just writers who write about this stuff outside of boxing who were saying that even though streaming's the future and everything. Now these are writers for like Consumer Reports, some other business and then some other business publications. The streaming model on subscription is not viable money-wise down the line. I mean,
especially not when you're giving out $30 million contracts too.
Right, and they're even saying for things outside of sports and boxing, it's not viable in the long term. That they're going to have to go to ads or wildly increased subscription fees. And they said that when they start doing that, that could swing the pendulum back to then people are going to stop cutting the cord because then people are going to say, well, if I have to get all these a la carte streaming services and it's costing me $10 more a month than my old cable bill was, then I might as well just get my cable package. So, the jury's still out on how it's going to go. Not that a lot of the stuff might not be streamed, but the financial numbers apparently don't work the way they're set up now. So it's something, there's going to be pay-per-view or ads are going to have to get involved in things. So I don't think the Canelo Jacobs thing's going to be regular.
Yeah. Well, now I just want to wrap the show up because I don't even feel good about doing a boxing show anymore.
We might as well move on to UFC.
Well, we ought to just go back and maybe we'll just do a throwback show. We'll do a nightly boxing show. We'll start looking up news from 1970, and we'll start from there. And then me and John can fight about Ali and Frazier.
Yeah.
Which would be a lot better thing to fight about.
But boxing is the one sport, not the one. I suppose there's other fans in other sports, but I see it more boxing. It's not a lot of people, but I've noticed that there is a certain crew of boxing fans that don't watch any current boxing. All they do is talk about.
You know what?
Talk about old fights.
The only reason I watch any current boxing is because we do this show, and on the Daily Show, you could ask Jeremiah. The only thing I worry about is what's the on this day we can talk about tonight, because. Boxing knows is all the same. It's this guy's with this guy, and he won't fight this guy because they got different promoters. And hell, I remember when Bob Arum and Don King would get together to make a big fight, and these guys can't. And it blows my mind that Spence and Crawford is not even brought up by anybody.
No.
It's like even the It's like even the fighters know that it can't be made. I mean, you look at their attitude toward this. Yeah, you look at their attitude towards the situation, and they're like, oh, well, maybe sometime down the line. Jesus, dude, it is Errol Spence's birthday today. Okay, he's 29 years old. And I'm not saying, he's past his prime or any of that shit yet, right? But he's 29 years old. I mean, he's a welterweight. Okay, you never know when a guy's going to hit a wall, when he's going to start to physically deteriorate, because technically your physical prime is about 26. I mean, you're at your most strength when you're like 30 or something. I mean, this is a real time sensitive issue, and these guys they sound like company men, right? They're just like, oh well, we're just going to have to wait until we milk it a little bit, and there's hype surrounding it. How long? Let's imagine that we have to wait 2 years for this stuff. Crawford and Spence will be viewed as the number one and number two guys for years before this gets made. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't think either one of
fans
them is going to fight Keith Thurman anytime soon. But, of course, I think Thurman has waited so long that he's already missed his window also.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, when you go to Nepal and you get married and you act like you're off on vacation and just fine doing so, it's tough to say whether or not these guys are going to have the same kind of hunger. And I think they lack foresight, because if Keith Thurman could have went on vacation to Nepal and got married and done all this crap in between fights. I mean, these guys still have play, especially at a world-class level. When these guys are only fighting, 2 times a year, maybe, you have plenty of time to do all the fun stuff after collecting a check. I mean, Keith Thurman has missed out on millions of dollars because of his layoff. Errol Spence is missing out on millions of dollars because of the way he's been managed. I mean, the guy has fought, 4 times in the last 4 years or something like that? That is not something you want to do when you're trying to build a brand. I mean, he's had, 1 fight in Texas?
And it's also not something you do if you're trying to get better.
Exactly. I mean, Errol Spence, like we've talked about, Mike, Errol Spence may have been a potential great welterweight. Maybe. Right? I'm not sure, Mikey Garcia will necessarily tell us that, but if Errol Spence had been fighting, at a Sugar Ray Leonard pace, against contenders and getting the best earlier, we know a lot more about him. But instead, Al Heyman has to wait for the TV money. Then they put that 1 fight on Showtime, and that 1 fight's not against a big name opponent. It's just, I think we're ruining careers here. I mean, because again, you think about it. If Errol Spence had been fighting at a Golovkin or Kovalev pace when they were at their best, he would be much better known. I mean, he would be in the spot.
And he'd be a much better fighter, Jeremiah.
Exactly.
That's the thing that goes back to me, is that we're missing the best of these guys because of this. Spence Garcia is interesting to me because I don't know how good Spence is. If I knew if he'd been fighting all these times and kicking the shit out of everybody, I may not be interested. So I guess it worked there to get me to buy this fight. But that's my main thing here, is I want to see if Errol Spence is good or not. And really, kind of the same thing with Garcia, because there's not too many guys I look out today and I think, oh, man, this is an all-time great fighter. I don't know if there's any. I think Gennady Golovkin was a damn good fighter. But damn good. I think he could have hung with probably most middleweights that ever lived. I don't know it's an all-time great. I think Andre Ward, he's retired, so he doesn't count. I mean, who that's a champion right now do you look at, hands down, that's an all-time great fighter? I mean, Lomachenko, I don't even count that yet.
No, I mean, I think it's because of political divisions. I mean, you look at a guy like Lomachenko. If you would have stayed at 126, I mean, part of the reason he moved up is because he wasn't going to, because of political divisions. Arum and Heyman were, I think, in a lawsuit at the time when Lomachenko was down at 126. So it's like he knows he's not going to get the Leo Santa Cruzes or the Carl Framptons of the world. So he's got to try his hand elsewhere. Right? Errol Spence, he's been under the same promotional banner as Keith Thurman and Sean Porter and Danny Garcia for years now. I mean, these fights should have already happened. And again, it's not that none of these guys can be all-time greats. It's just we're not ever really going to learn it with a lot of these guys.
But, all right, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody, me and Jeremiah will be here Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern. John's older than us, so he has to go to bed at an earlier time. But if one of these times he can't go to bed, he's always welcome to come on the show, especially since we had William Pounds on, 2 weeks ago, and he was an idiot. So you would have really enjoyed debating him, John.
I would enjoy getting down on that level, huh?
Yeah, because Floyd Mayweather would have beat Sugar Ray Robinson. And that's really plain to see, too, if you're an idiot. Also, Survive in Advance. Tomorrow we will have a special edition with me, Steve Risley, and Randy Cross, former San Francisco 49er, who will be on to talk about offensive linemen in the combine from this last week. Wednesday, we'll have Jeff Severson, who is a safety for Super Bowl 7 for the Washington Redskins. Also in multiple movies, including North Dallas 40. He'll be on Wednesday to talk with us about that. But make sure you go like us everywhere you can find us. Comment whenever you can. Rate us on iTunes. Jeremiah, anything else you want to add?
No, it's just, again, like I say just about every week, do the rate, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, but also, give us feedback. I mean, if there's something you'd like to see added to the show, some way we can improve your listening experience, feel free to message me, or find us on the social media portals and message us there, or, just find John on Twitter because he's pretty active there, just at him or something, and we'll soak that in and do what we can with the feedback.
All right, and on Twitter, it's at TGTN Boxing or at Grueling Truth. Make sure you follow us there. Make sure you check out our Facebook page. So you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.